He looked at me differently that day, and I didn't correct him. Not with words. Not with silence. Not even with a shift of my eyes. I just let it happen. I've always believed betrayal was loud. A slammed door. A whispered name in the dark. A lipstick smudge on a collar. Something sharp, visible, undeniable. But mine didn't begin that way. No fire. No noise. It began in the quiet. It began with a look. Marcus wasn't a stranger. Quite the opposite, he was practically family. My husband Daniel's best friend since their college days, Marcus was present for every birthday, every holiday, every just because Sunday barbecue. He was the constant in our peripheral vision, the reliable plus one in our shared life. I never thought of him as anything more. Not really. Until that Sunday. It had been a long morning at church. The kind where the pastor's words drift past your ears without landing. My mind was foggy from the night before. Daniel had stayed up late watching something on his tablet, and the blue glow had stretched across our bed like a wall between us. Marcus came by afterward, like always. He brought pastries from that overpriced bakery downtown. Said he saw them and thought of me. Lemon glazed, my favorite. I told him that, and he smiled as if he'd known. Maybe he had. We sat in the kitchen, sun pooling across the tiles like spilled honey. Daniel was in the living room, half asleep with the game playing softly. I was wiping down the counter when I felt it, eyes on me. Not just seen, but studied. Slowly, carefully, I turned. And there he was, watching me not inappropriately, not hungrily, but attentively. Like I was a painting he'd never looked at closely until now. There was no smile, no flirtation, just recognition. As if he had just remembered something he never knew he forgot. I held his gaze, just for a moment. Maybe less, maybe more. Time felt syrupy in that light. I didn't say anything. I didn't look away. I didn't reach for the towel to dry my hands. I just stood there, sponge in one palm, the other resting on the edge of the marble. And I smiled. Not broadly, not suggestively, just enough to be polite, and something more. He blinked, looked down at his coffee, cleared his throat, said something about the game. I nodded, pretended to listen. My pulse was louder than his voice. In that instant, something shifted. I didn't know what. I only knew it couldn't be undone. Daniel and I met in our 20s. Fell in love the way you're supposed to, fast, clumsy, full of bright promises. We got married before we knew how to be married. Before the long silences. Before the quiet compromises. He was never cruel. Never unfaithful. Just busy, distracted. Comfortable in the way that forgets to be curious. He asked about my day, but rarely listened to the answer. We had dinner together, but with our eyes fixed on two separate screens. He loved me, I think. But he hadn't seen me in years. That's what made the look matter. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't clear or defined. But it stirred something inside me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Marcus noticed things. He remembered stories I'd told once in passing. He asked follow-up questions the next week. He looked at me like he heard me, not just waited for his turn to speak. And on that Sunday, he looked at me like he saw someone beautiful, not because of how I looked, but because of how I existed. I wore a navy blue dress that day. Simple, cotton, cinched at the waist. Daniel hadn't said a word about it. But Marcus? He glanced at me like it meant something. And I let it mean something. That night, Daniel was asleep before I turned off the lamp. His breathing was steady, soft. I watched the ceiling for a long time. I thought about the way Marcus had looked at me. Not in the moment itself, but after. When I caught him watching me walk back into the kitchen, pretending not to, there was something tentative in it. Hesitant. Careful. He wasn't going to cross a line. I knew that. He wouldn't dare. But I couldn't stop thinking about the line itself, and how, for the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on one. I fell asleep wondering what would happen if I took one step forward. The week that followed, that look felt longer than the ones that came before it. Not because anything happened in the visible sense, but because everything inside me had rearranged itself into a new configuration. A more alert one. A more dangerous one. It wasn't that I had started seeking Marcus out. I didn't suddenly change our routines or invent reasons to be alone together. I was still me. Still the wife. Still the woman who organized the spice rack by alphabet and folded towels in thirds. But now my heart beat differently in certain moments. When the doorbell rang on Sunday. When I reached for the red blouse I hadn't worn in a year. When I caught my own reflection in the mirror and didn't look away quite as quickly. It wasn't about Marcus. Not exactly. It was about the part of myself that had been silent for so long and was suddenly humming like a low, persistent chord beneath a quiet song. When Sunday came again, everything felt sharp. The air was clearer. My awareness heightened. I wore the red blouse. Marcus arrived like always, with his slightly uneven smile and that knowing glint in his eye that he tried to hide. He held the box of pastries like a peace offering to a war we hadn't named yet. This time it was cherry danishes. He knew I preferred lemon. I think that was intentional. A small rebellion. A private joke. Something unsaid. I opened the box, thanked him, and noticed his eyes linger not on the blouse, but on my face, as if he was searching for permission, or maybe for restraint. Daniel was in the living room again, eyes on the game, body reclined in his favorite chair that seemed to mold around his form like a cocoon of habit. "Coffee?" I asked. "Always," Marcus said. His voice was quieter than usual, less performative, more real. As I poured, I felt the weight of his gaze on my back. It wasn't hungry. It wasn't invasive. It was curious. Like he was trying to read a book from a shelf he hadn't noticed before. When I turned around and handed him the mug, our fingers touched just barely. But something electric passed through that moment. Not sparks. Not flames. Just warmth. Familiarity. Recognition. He took the mug without speaking. I busied myself with stirring sugar into mine, even though I drink it black. That night, I didn't sleep again. I lay beside Daniel, staring at the ceiling while his breath moved in soft waves. I counted the seconds between his inhales and exhales. I thought about the way Marcus looked at me, not with lust, not even with longing, just with presence. The kind of presence that makes you remember what it feels like to matter. I remembered the early days with Daniel, when he used to pull me close in the kitchen while I was cooking, when he'd write notes on napkins and leave them in my coat pocket, when his eyes lit up just because I walked into the room. Those moments had stopped being moments. They had become stories, things we used to do. Now I was the one keeping us afloat. I made the plans, remembered the anniversaries, asked the questions, and he answered with one-word replies, or sometimes just a nod. I hadn't stopped loving him, but I had started mourning us in real time, and Marcus, simply by noticing, reminded me of what I was losing. It was 3 Sundays later when Daniel left town for a conference. I didn't ask many questions. He didn't offer many details. We were practiced at this, the exchange of surface-level information. Marcus came by, even though he hadn't planned to. Said he had some books he thought I might like. I knew it was an excuse. He knew I knew. We sat outside this time. The backyard was quiet. The trees were turning, edges touched by the first hints of autumn. Leaves hung heavy, gold and rust, like they too were debating whether to fall. He handed me the first book. Poetry. Something introspective. "Thought of you," he said. I ran my fingers over the spine. It felt heavier than it should have. We didn't speak for a while. Just listened to the breeze. the occasional car passing in the distance. Our silence wasn't awkward. It was full, charged. I noticed things, he said finally. I don't mean to, but I do. I turned to him. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the leaves. Like what? I asked. He shrugged. How your voice changes when Daniel's around. How you smile more with your eyes than your mouth. How you haven't worn your wedding ring since spring. My breath caught. I hadn't realized he noticed that. I hadn't realized I'd stopped wearing it. He looked at me then, full on. Not asking, not pressuring, just seeing, and I let him. He reached across the table. His hand found mine, just rested there. Warm, steady, honest. I didn't pull away. I didn't lean in. We sat like that for what felt like forever. The weight of the moment held us in place. When he finally let go, he didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just stood, said goodbye, and walked down the stone path without looking back. And I sat there, hand open, fingers tingling. Daniel came home 2 days later. He brought me a travel mug from the hotel gift shop and didn't notice that I hadn't made the bed. He told me about the keynote speaker and how the buffet wasn't as good as last year. I nodded, smiled, listened. I was good at that. He didn't ask if anything happened while he was gone. He didn't notice the book of poetry on the nightstand, or the fact that I'd started sleeping closer to the edge of the bed. Nothing had happened, and yet everything had. I hadn't broken any vows, not through actions, not through what I said, but in some quiet, irreversible way, my heart had turned its face to the light and wondered what it might feel like to bloom again. Marcus never came back after that. He texted once, a poem, no context. I never replied, but I read it over and over, until the words felt like breath. He looked at me differently that day, and I didn't correct him, because in that moment, I wasn't anyone's wife. I wasn't the keeper of routines or the echo in a quiet house. I was a woman who had been seen. And even though I never crossed that line, I stood near enough to understand the risk and chose not to. And sometimes that's the hardest kind of loyalty, to stay true in silence. The kind you carry inside, unspoken, unshared, but never forgotten. It's been 7 months since the last time Marcus and I saw each other. 7 months since that autumn afternoon when his hand touched mine, and the silence between us said everything neither of us could afford to. The seasons have changed. The trees outside my window are green again. The birds wake me early. There's a new softness in the light. But in me, something remains still, paused in that unspoken moment when I could have moved forward, and didn't. I've become an expert in silence, in holding memories up to the light like pressed flowers, fragile, flattened, kept alive by reverence, not use. And still, I think of him. Not every day, but often enough. Daniel and I are still married. We still sleep in the same bed, eat at the same table, watch the same shows. But something shifted in me that neither of us talks about. I am present, but no longer waiting. I no longer reach for his hand under the covers. I no longer wait for him to notice what I'm wearing. I no longer expect him to ask why I stopped baking on Sundays. Our life is a dance choreographed by memory, every movement rehearsed. No improvisation, no eye contact, just the comfort of not tripping over the same steps. He is kind. He is consistent. He is Daniel. But I've stopped pretending that kindness is intimacy. And he stopped asking me where my smile went. I saw Marcus 2 weeks ago. It wasn't planned. I was leaving the bookstore. Arms full of secondhand novels and a new journal I didn't need when I heard someone say my name. Just once. Soft. Measured. I turned, and there he was. Standing beside his car, eyes shaded by sunglasses, but unmistakable all the same. He looked older, leaner, tired in a way that felt earned. We stood there for a long time without speaking. Finally, I smiled. Not wide, just real. And he smiled back. "Still writing?" he asked. "Still reading," I said. We talked. Small things. Safe things. But beneath it, a current moved. Not desire. Not hope. Just acknowledgement. Of what was. Of what never was. Of what almost became. He didn't ask if I was happy. He didn't need to. He asked if I'd ever read the poem he sent. The one with no explanation. I told him I had. He nodded. "It reminded me of you." I said nothing, because I knew. I had known even then. He looked down at his hands, then back at me. "I thought about writing you more." "I know," I said. We didn't hug. We didn't touch. But something passed between us, something like peace. He opened his car door. Before he left, he paused. "You're not invisible, you know." And then he drove away. Just like that. There are certain stories you live through once and then spend the rest of your life unpacking. Marcus was never mine, and I was never his. But there was something holy in that. Something sacred in the fact that we never broke the world we lived in to chase what might have been. It takes strength to walk away, but it takes a different kind of strength to never arrive. And now I carry him not as a regret, not even as a longing, but as a quiet reminder that I am not invisible, that I can still be seen, that the line I didn't cross was still a door I found the courage to close. I still wear the red blouse sometimes, not for anyone else, just for me. Because when he looked at me differently that day, I realized I could too.